world where growth is the game changer and experience paves the path to success, comes a podcast series that brings together visionaries and practitioners to explore how to capture value-creating growth. This series will bring you insight from the front lines of decision-making. We'll bring decades of collective wisdom to share the best practices of leadership, strategy, and governance.
Welcome to Focus on Growth. Today our topic is going to be AI from two perspectives. One, a very broad panorama of what's going on, and then secondly, we'll explore in some detail what it could mean in practice, how it could be applied in your organization, my organization, how it is it really works. I'm Tom Doorley. I'll be your host today. With me is John Donovan. John and I have known each other for a while. We were partners back at Deloitte Consulting and worked on clients together. Before I retired from Deloitte, we worked on a book that became a bestseller called Value Creating Growth. Since then, John has done many things, led companies, been an entrepreneur, and currently is an active investor and advisor to AI companies. In addition, he sits on the boards of Palo Alto Networks, Lockheed Martin, and the President's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Council. John, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, so let's start off, as we said, with this sort of first context painting. You know a lot about AI. You've delved into it. You've worked on it, and as I said, invested in it. So give us a broad perspective about what this thing kind of looks like, and then we'll get into details.
Well, it's interesting because the evolution of AI, if you were an evolutionary, you would say we've had sort of a series of next steps that date back 3, 4, 5 years. But if you're a revolutionary, you'd say a match got lit in February or March of 2023 when ChatGPT came out, and it drove everybody into, the adoption of at least trying out AI. And as I always like to say, AI, impresses a lot of people because we usually give it tasks we're not very good at, not the tasks we're best at. So I'll often ask, raise your hand if you think AI is interesting, and everybody raise their hand. Who thinks AI is better at their own job than they are? And everybody takes their hand down. So as I always say, it will always be better at writing love poems than I am because I've never written one. But I'm not ready for it to take my job yet.
I like that, and I think you're right. So the other day we talked about the ideas you have for how it might be deployed, and specifically some frameworks. So tell us about the frameworks, and we can evolve into what it means in practice.
Yeah. I think that the easiest way to think about starting the problem is you must, because whether it's an existential threat to you or whether it's an opportunity for you, ignoring either of those is not a great idea as a business leader. So the way I think about it is there's 3 types of AI, and the first type is whole brain emulation, which is essentially saying, I have a machine, it's got a better memory than I do. If I read a book, it can read all books. And so there are certain tasks that I do today that I can get the assistance of a machine that will have a capability, but it's not really novel or innovative. It's just taking things that I do today and making them giving me an efficient way to do them. The second way, and that's not at all, by the way, creepy, because it's all things we do today.
Sure.
The second one I think about is an extension of the whole brain, or what's often referred to as inference, if then else type of logic. And now we're getting into an area that's a little bit trickier. We've heard or read about hallucinations, and where various reporters have used AI and gotten it into very dark places or very risky places. And that's really an area that has people, I think, a little bit nervous about applying it, where I'm knowingly giving incorrect answers to customers or to employees. And that I think feels a little bit scarier, and really it rightfully should. And then the third type, which is artificial general intelligence, which is much about the spooky sci-fi stuff, is an area that's concerned because we are really in unknown territory. So that way of thinking about it puts it in a nice risk framework that says, if you're going to emulate a whole brain in work you do today, and you're going to aid a human being in work they do to make them more effective and more efficient, why not? Other areas where you're knowingly giving the wrong or bad answers out, you really have to be thoughtful.
I think that's great. So you said in terms of we have to be really careful about being giving bad answers. There's some sectors of the economy where that's particularly important, right? Where you have to get it right the first time, and you have to be right, or it's just a total mess.
Yeah, there are four things that AI is not today. It's
Hmm.
not accurate enough. It's
Right.
not efficient enough economically to deploy. It's not secure enough private because data leaks into the models, and it's not explainable. And that's not like a backdrop for what's the greatest thing you should go do for your company.
Hmm.
And so I think that overcoming those things, there's certain sectors of the economy where this is risk free to go engage in, and there are other areas like military applications, counterterrorism, fraud detection, where you don't want false positives. You can't afford an answer that is not only not wrong, but you can't even have one that's mildly inaccurate.
Hmm.
So, those are the areas where you start to see people being a lot more thoughtful and a lot more deliberate about how they deploy it.
Yeah, I understand that. So one of the things that sort of I've thought about since we had our conversation last time, just last week, was the idea that says that a lot of people use this as kind of maybe a first point to get rid of things. Should we be able to do more the same stuff with fewer people, save ourselves cost? But I like the conversation about opportunity, how this could be something that could be a wonderful avenue for us to access new areas and, in fact, grow. And as you and I did in our book, Value Creating Growth, growth is the way in which we all create value. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunity side of what AI could mean to us.
Yeah, I think right now a lot of companies, when they look at their industries or evolving their industries, that we hear all the time about labor shortages. We don't have enough, cybersecurity experts. We don't have enough people that know how to do, rapid coding. So we have STEM skill shortages all over the place. And so I think the real big opportunity for a company here is with a human either in the loop or a human on the loop, not a human replacement type of AI. And with a human in the loop or a human on the loop, you can correct for some of those things I had mentioned earlier that AI is not. And you can have a nice partnership with man and machine where you can get more done with the same people. And I think that's going to provide a great growth opportunity for companies that figure out how to get more from employees by giving them ways to get rid of mundane tasks or to do lookups or some of those things that you might go hire a brand new person out of school and give them a terribly inefficient labyrinth to walk through to get you an answer. You can
Right.
now begin to augment these, and so I think that that's where the opportunity is take areas where there are skill shortages and find ways to um, amplify the work that humans do to get more done with the same people.
Yeah, it reminds me in a very simple way of way back when. This goes back to my early consulting career. We had that kind of work you're talking about done by BAs, and they would dig and they would do research and all that sort of thing. And in fact, way back when, before Excel, you had to do a worksheet, a spreadsheet manually. So if we decide, hey, let's change the growth rate, let's sort of reduce the cost here, every cell had to be done by hand. Along comes Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then comes Excel. And we found out, just like you said, as opposed to saying, well, we don't need as many BAs, the BAs were freed up to give us more information, help us to explore more things. And I think those are great examples of the fact that we can, in fact, do more, explore new areas, and we can all grow because of that. Now, how do we introduce AI into an organization? So here's our organization. We're looking at it, we say, yeah, there's AIs out there. And you say, yeah, we ought to be involved. So how do we take that message and bring it into our organization so that they can understand and people can actually work with it? Because
Yeah.
this is a fairly arcane technology, particularly the chat GPT versions and those sorts of things.
Yeah, those large language models, I think, get to be a little bit of black magic because of lack of explainability. So I've seen two models that have been adopted. I've seen more than that, but I think there's two that are prevalent. The first is it is a very narrow skill set of those who build and operate these models. There are really rigorous needs for data protection and for grooming the data for use. And so those organizations build a center of excellence, throwback for, a couple of decades ago, that says anytime you have a scarce resource, let's put them in one place and make sure they're as efficient and effective as they can be. And I think organizations that are a little more uh, deliberate in their requirements have been really effective at building a center of excellence where people can go submit their projects to get aid, and then they'll say, okay, well, that's a really great one for the business. We want to invest in it. Let's get those scarce resources and put you in the front of the line. It
Hmm.
might be an organization that wants to make a quantum leap in their customer support NPS scores, or what might be someone who wants more effectiveness from their sales team. But it has, you have to at some point prioritize there. The second model is a model which I think more companies that have existential threats coming at them, where they need to move very quickly, have sort of trained everybody who's got, responsibility of budgets and manpower, particularly those that have large coding operations, because the one thing that the early models are good at is writing code, turns out.
Hmm.
So those organizations have tend to maybe add a little more risk, move a little more quickly to avoid that existential risk. So their scarce resources are writing policy statements, doing governance and reviewing to make sure nothing bad gets into the wild, but a lot less of model development. So those two models I think have been the most prevalent for deployments. And again, it's really you're just overcoming scarce resources.
Sure. So in terms of this discussion, one idea is to have everybody sort of be involved, right? Everybody's sort of taking a pace. Everybody is all in, as it were, on doing this. Uh, But I think also, right, we do need to have some group of people who are at the forefront, who are continuing learning, because, as you know, this thing is changing all the time and it's pretty scary. We don't know where it's going to go. So somebody has to be kind of out there, right, at the forefront. So some elements of center of excellence are really important, even on what you call your all-in model, which I like very much. I mean, there's certainly no reason not to say to everybody in the organization, figure out how this damn thing's going to work and do it in some time frame, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's incumbent upon every organization that feels that this is a big part of their future to invest in understanding the invention cycle. And I think of it, invention comes before innovation, innovation comes before, like, you have scalable solutions. So you really do have to be on the forefront with a few people so that you are really well aware of what's coming down, what the risk reward trade offs are. I don't think you can wait until every um, governance dimension and all the
Sure.
accuracy is there. I think you have to, because there's a learning curve here that if you're not on it, you're probably getting left behind.
Yeah, so here's actually a tactical question for you. Well, one of my partners, Fred Feldman, by the way, is a producer on this as well. So thank you for that, Fred. He asked the question of, so how do you know that an AI product might actually work in your organization? Are there any tips you can say that you can tell beforehand that this one might actually be valuable versus forget about it? Do you have any sort of guidelines, any sort of tips in that direction?
Well, I think there are things where they tend to be areas where it's human centric and highly inaccurate.
Hmm.
So if you remember the days of going and checking in at the airline, and the ticket agent would, if you ever saw what they would have to type into their computers, these strings that star, backslash B, front slash L,
Right.
and those are the types of things that back then would say, well, let's do kiosks and push buttons. So things that are prone to high error rates because of the breadth of the job, for instance, would be a really good candidate. Areas where there's a creative dimension, it turns out that actually the inference and the creativity is something that these early large language models are very good at. But I think with enough diligence, a human in the loop or on the loop, as I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
um, you can embark on a task and get some precision out of AI. It just takes some work. So I would say if you find anything that's inaccurate, don't be afraid, jump in.
Mhm.
If you find something that's mission critical, then jump in with a very different approach, with not to try to get something up and running, but try to work on the precision so that you can start to get something that you can get a precision that humans might not have, whereas the other one is a simple as getting higher volume or better accuracy than humans currently have.
Sure. Sure. I appreciate that. I think this is very helpful, John. So before we sign off, because we try to do these in 15 minutes, talk to us about what comes next for you. What sort of lays out in terms of your life and career as you look forward now?
Well, I broke it into four phases. I think I'm probably most known right now for the operational phase, and I don't know that that's going to end up being the most interesting chapter of my life. I'm right now doing a lot of things at boards, and then a lot of the areas I'm investing in are AI and machine learning won't manifest as large companies for a decade. So I
Yeah.
really am trying to close chapters and open new chapters. And I think it's much like a high school physics professor. As I progress in my career, I want to see people in front of me that are like students the same age every year, because it brings an enthusiasm. So I'm really enjoying my time as an investor right now. And I think that that's where I can make the biggest difference, because the intersection of my experience and where the markets are going, I think there's a lot of people that are involved in these fields that really need some help and assistance that I can provide. So that's where I am.
Great. I wish you well, John. Thank you for your insights. And so, as I mentioned to the folks who are listening, if you have some ideas you'd like us to cover, send us to us at podcast@sagepartners.net. That's podcast@sagepartners.net. Thank you, John. And thank you for listening. Take care and be well.
Experience creating value, leadership, strategy, governance. Join us to transform the way you think about the big things you face and how to act to achieve success.